So the game is Wars of Religion, Fellowship of Simulations. I generally, every now and then, say, oh, here's a game on a subject matter, and it looks like maybe they're doing a good enough job on it that, yeah, I want to give it a shot. It's pretty rare. In this case, I have a few games that handle the Wars of Religion in France. The first one I can think of is Armada, but they handle it in a sort of, subsidiary role in the game. Armada is one of them, Europa Universalis, obviously, and Virgin Queen. These are the only ones I can think of that handle it at all. Trying to think, I don't think even the musket and pike stuff, which is tactical, and I wouldn't really count. So in terms of covering the strategic element, this is the first game I've seen that is detailed on the Wars of Religion alone. Now, it's a card-based, but not a CDG design. And you're going to have different kinds of cards in play. Take a look at some of the components. You have a bunch of people that'll form your character deck, and you and the other players assemble your hand from that deck, which is going to allow you to operate in the court phase using those characters. There's a couple of events for, pretty much a couple come in each turn, but at the beginning of the game, each player has just 2 of them to begin with. There's additionals here of both characters and events that'll be added. And you get 1 of those each turn. So, most of the events won't actually show up. And then you have military event cards, which are used to help, throw a little bit of friction and randomness into the situation there. And they're a fairly limited set of them, but there's a fair number. You have counters for all the leaders that are present in the game. And they'll be with sort of a military competence, a rank, which is similar to in EU. An A is your highest ranked leader for your faction. The name of the leader, the turns that they're naturally available. They could die earlier. You also have some event chits, which again come in a few per turn. You have some chits of leaders who are generated only by events. A bunch of cubes that serve multiple purposes. A few informational counters for special cases, including revolts and stuff like that. A set of armies for each of the 3 factions. This is really a 3-player game. There are rules to play it in 2, though, and solo for that matter. But it's designed to be a 3-player game. The map is a map of France, separated by provincial borders, and a bunch of cities, each of which has a cube on it. The cube indicates control. Black is the Huguenots, red is the Catholic League, and blue is the sort of royalist center. You track a count of the total number of cities up here. That's important for victory. And you have some counters here that are tracked on this little track, which will be the number of... Geez, I don't even know. I can't read these things. That just says Huguenot on it. Okay, so in these rules, and the rules are very iffy. They're translated from French, and it almost seems like a machine translator was used for them. Some of the errors are just disturbing. For example, these are called treaties. They're not. They're treatises. They're just works of literature, used to try to sway the religious and political views of the time. This is cash. The treatises are actually a major victory condition to the game, so you will want to gather them. They're a primary part of the victory status. The cash is going to be used largely, if not exclusively, to move your armies. And then you have these cards. Each player has a set of one of these cards, which lists the diplomacy actions that they can take and the nations they can take them against, leaders that they have who can turncoat to a different side, their income, however they manage to get that, automatic victory conditions that allow them to win the game. I believe that's at the end of a turn. And the different court actions that are available, that's going to be the same for everyone except the royalists have an additional one or two, I don't know. You have these little tracks for armies, which the way you mark them, you're going to have actual army counters that are on the board that show up during each. Basically, the 6 turns are being posited as 6 different wars of religion. Now, the reality is there were more than 6, but it's basically 6 sections of the game, each of which is going to be covering a court phase where you do some intriguing and maybe a little bit of semi-military type operations, and then a military phase where you use your money and your armies directly to influence stuff on the board. And the court phase, you might get military results, but like capturing cities and such, not through what are called surprise attacks. But you're not going to be moving your armies around during that. You will generate armies potentially during that period. Anyway, if you have an army on the board, like Army 1 here, you would mark how many strength points it has in it. All right. The original dice for the game, are these guys. I really don't like them, so I pulled some nice rounded dice of the same color to use. I'm going to need this cup because there's chit pulls for some of the events. See if there's anything component-wise I've totally ignored. I don't think so. All right, let us start on the rules. Now, like I said, some of it seems to be translation issues. Some of it may actually just be that the rules are not well written to begin with. That's kind of hard to tell. This was a Kickstarter. I generally shy away from Kickstarters, and I also shy away from picking up games just, off the spur of the moment type situation. But my happiness with Europa Simulation Europa or whatever, Europa Simulations, which I think runs out of Italy. A couple of games I picked up from them I really liked. I've got my fantasies about AWE and whatnot, although those rules are worse than these. And, I'm always like game for something when it's on a subject like this that I'm definitely kind of in my wheelhouse. And I looked over the rules briefly on the Kickstarter. I was right at the end of the Kickstarter, last couple days of it, and just said, screw it, I'll throw my money into this and see what comes out of it. And I hope I really like it. Well, I don't know. I kind of knew that it was going to be a card. I knew it was going to be card-based. Kind of knew it was going to be kind of light game. We'll see what I think about it when I'm done. I have not played it at all yet. Part of me says, gee, I should fiddle around with it. So the rules are the rules. The playbook contains the scenarios in the game, the 2-player variant rules, Two-player variant rules are fairly long. A commented game turn, I read through that. Some of that may have answered some of the questions I had, but I know at least some of the questions I had are not covered there. Sort of maybe edge cases and whatever. And then fairly detailed historical notes, and then all the characters and all the event cards, I think, have some additional details on them to help bring you up to speed. What is lacking is any kind of designer's notes. There is really nothing of that sort. Nice, really big table of contents here. That should be helpful. So let us start looking at the rules. And I've read through them. I've read through the play example. I'm fuzzy enough that this is going to be somewhat problematic, but I'll try to point it as we go through it. And I need to light a pipe to deal with this, I can tell. The thing is, let's take a look at the map key, as it were. We got borders in these brown lines. We got rivers. They don't pay much importance except for the Loire, which I don't think is particularly handled in a special fashion in terms of appearance, but it's got these underlined cities next to it, which are of some importance. Okay. The province names are written like that. The major cities are written like this. And I am not having an easy time distinguishing between these two fonts. So I think maybe we go with the size of the city. Limoges is shown relatively large. Cognac is relatively small. I think we'll be able to tell from that. If the city is underlined, it is a Loire Valley city. This is one of the rules I'm not certain about, but I think what it means is as long as you control one of them, you have the capacity to cross the Loire. If you don't, you're hindered by it. Now, I'm guessing what that means is that you have shipping on the river. There's other ways you might interpret the rules, but that's the best I can come by it. And that comes from something out of the playbook, actually. I had the question already, and something in the playbook seems to indicate that that's the way they handle it. Whenever you do write a treatise, you get treatise points. You can kind of see how a machine translation would cause this issue, perhaps. I don't know. And you'll just grow there. Hey, let's take a look at the victory conditions. First of all, there's the before we dig any deeper. First, there's the automatic victory conditions. So for the Huguenots, it's to control more cities than the two other factions and to control Paris. For the Royalists, it's reduced the number of League cities to less than 6 and the number of Huguenot cities to less than 6. For the League, it's to control twice as many cities as the Huguenots. It would be possible for both of these to be satisfied at the same time, the Royalists and the League. Now, the other victory conditions are, at the end of the final turn, you get 7 points for the largest number of cities. Second largest gets 5. Third largest gets 3. Now this seems weird. Why are you giving points to the person who comes in last? Yeah, I don't have a good answer to that. Political conviction, whoever has the most treatises gets 4. Whoever has the second most gets 2. Who has the least gets 1. And I think you get that even if you have 0. And then I'm guessing Yeah, it's whoever has the most victory points just wins out of that. I need to light again. Like I said, each faction has a money counter as well as a treaties. We'll just call them treaties for now on. And then the Royalist player has a tax income, which they can raise taxes. This is an interesting period. The French have just gotten out of the Italian wars, and they're basically bankrupt due to them. And there goes my broken armrest. I had a buddy over, and he broke my chair. Shouldn't have trusted him with it. I don't know. That one's even more breakable, I think. But we got the army and revolt counters. The revolts are basically a neutral army, which can show up and due to events. We have the event chits, which are going to be added to the cup, and one is drawn each turn. You also have event cards. Talked about the leaders. The character cards. Okay, let's look at character cards. So character cards have much the same information as the leader counters. They have the name of the person. They have the turns that they're naturally alive. They could die outside of earlier than they're supposed to. And then they have two values. I believe the left value is their combat capability, and the right value is their intrigue capability. On the counters, you don't have this. But what you do have on the counters is a letter, which is handled by the party leadership, I think, rating. For their rank. Most characters have abilities. Says these are described in the court phase chapter. Well, they're not on here, so I don't know. I think they're just the court actions, but maybe I'm incorrect about that. Well, no, some of them. So, like this guy has provinces associated with him, and that's important. I don't know if there aren't a lot of writers, so I'm looking to see if I can find. Everybody has like one or two. Party leader. There, it says writer on there. Party leader. Writer. Diplomat, that's another ability. Okay. There are 4 event card decks, one for each player, and they start at 2 event cards per deck to begin with. And then the common war deck that I already also discussed. If an event has a star on it, like this, it's removed after being played. Ones that don't, I guess, go back into the event card deck. You have your faction player aids. I've talked about them. You have your cubes. These are also used to track war points. Okay, so when you win battles during the war phase, after the court phase, you, I guess, track the points that you gain from winning those battles on this. I believe whoever has the most war points gets a treaties point. But the war point, the prosecution of the war can convert cities, which is also of importance. You might roll lots and lots of dice. I might need to go grab more. When an army takes attrition, it loses 1 troop strength point. You basically make a check and see if you lose a point. You can convert a city by changing the color of the cube. By the way, these blue and black cubes, I don't know if they're discernible to you. They're pretty hard for me under this lighting. This lighting is not bad either. I really wish they had made the blue ones somewhat paler. A neighboring country is any country listed on the diplomacy chart on the player aid. Yeah, countries that you can do diplomacy with. The rank is a letter rating to define the ranking order within a faction. Now, I think the party leader ranks are different from the military ranks. Because I only saw a couple of people with party leader ranks, and I think everybody who can be a general has a rank, you know, and we'll see that as we pull it out. Generally, you'll be rolling 2 dice and try to be getting a roll of 7 or more to succeed on whatever action you're taking. Now, there's 3 players in the game, 3 factions. The Huguenots, the Royalists, and the League. But there are 2 sides at any one time in the game. At the beginning of the game, the Royalists and the Catholic League are one side, and the Huguenots are on their own. Later in the game, the Royalists and the Huguenots become the side, and the Catholic League is their opposition. I don't know why you'd want to repartition leaders, or players. Oh, yeah, they're talking about that. Okay. That happens after the call to arms. The call to arms, which is a sequence you have to get to, ends up triggering the Royalist switch. Now, there are some special events. St. Bartholomew, during the court phase of the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th turn, the Royalist makes a roll to see if St. Bartholomew's happens. And that's based on this number here. This triggers the removal of some Huguenot leaders and cities that the Huguenots gained at the end of a war in which they were victorious. And that'll have its own significant special roles. But basically, you have a shot of triggering that during the court phase, which is towards the beginning of the turn. The call to arms also happens once per game. It triggers the last turn of the game, the end of which a victorious faction will be determined. The way that's worded, I assume it can happen earlier than turn 6, but I don't remember seeing anything about that. Okay, in any ties, the Royalist player gets to determine how to break it. Okay. The turn, every game turn is divided up. There's an initial phase where you basically set your deck together. The event phase where the random events are drawn from the chit cup. And I think each player gets an event out of their deck. The court phase, where you perform these court actions, which are an attempt to set yourself up for the military phase, but also you can do direct capture of cities through it and such not. The war phase, where you'll be alternating turns, basically moving each of your leaders. And you can move each. So basically, you have to you have to move your highest ranked leader first, and you'll be moving into a province, and other leaders can move in with them and consolidate a force, and then you'll conduct an attack of some sort in that space, and we'll see how that all works out. Then you're allowed to keep going with other leaders if you wish. And in each case, you have to pay money to do the things. So whoever's going first gets to do a lot of stuff at once if they want to, or they can pass the turn and let the next player perform actions. We'll see how that works mechanically. And then an end phase, which is just a scoring and cleanup. Okay, in the initial phase, you're going to build your character deck. Basically, by pulling people who are past their time. Well, wow, this guy shouldn't be in here. But yeah, so for example, here, this guy's only present on the first and second turns of the game. Get this guy over where he belongs. And you'd add the new leaders to the deck. Then you build your event deck by adding any cards for the new turn into the event deck, reshuffle it. Then you shuffle the war deck. I don't believe there's any timing aspects on those. Yeah, there are. Engineering gets better. Okay, so I'm going to have to look through these because engineering improves over time. Okay. And then you add the chits to the event chits pool. So the 3 players each have their own events deck, and there's a more general events chit pool. Okay, at the start of the event phase, a random player draws 1 chit from the events chit pool and resolves its effect, but not on the first turn of the game. Then each person draws the top card from their event deck, which has just been recreated, and they can hold this in their hand and use it when they wish to. When an event card with a star is played, it's removed from the game. Other cards are placed in the discard pile of their deck. Doesn't say what happens with the event pool, but I think the chit comes out. I think they're one-time things. During the court phase, you can play the event cards either before or after you play a character and perform that character's actions. Cards that have a title in red must be played in the turn they're drawn, and each player must play their red cards before any other cards from their hand during the court phase. And some cards will trigger call to arms, and they must be played at the start of the court phase before you build your court hand, because it changes the whole nature of the war. All right, I gotta swap batteries. In the court phase, well, you have on the cards, the ratings are between 0 and 3. Provinces listed on that card will allow that character to perform a surprise attack in those provinces, which is an attempt to capture a city in that province. Now, you take your character deck and you build it before you build your hand. Well, first you build the deck, which is just putting the right people in time. But then you're going to build your court hand, which we go to in a little bit. Some of the characters have multiple colors on them. For example, this guy. And what that means is that the other faction, the secondary faction, could capture this character and take them back, take them under their control, and then they'll be part of their deck to play with. I believe they can recruit back and forth both ways. And that's done with the recruit a character action, which may be return a personality on here. Okay. Some of the character cards have abilities. Okay, if they say faction leader and have a rank from A to D, those can become your faction leader. The highest ranked one is going to be that. Diplomat adds 1 to the die roll for any diplomatic action. Normally it will be using your intrigue for that. A diplomat gives you a bonus. A writer can write a treaty action with a bonus of +1 to the die roll. I think they're the only ones who can do it, unless you're out of writers. An administrator adds 1 to the tax collector action. Only the royalists can do this. Call to arms. The character enters play when call to arms is triggered or the Jesuit plot card is available, is played. So you'll see some of these don't have a turn. They come in. So call to arms can't be turn 6. It has to be. It has to be possible to happen earlier. Flying Squadron. When a male character from another faction who is not a priest, they don't have a cross on their card, tries to perform an action, you can discard the Flying Squadron character card and apply a 2-point penalty to that action. This is noble women or women who are willing to engage in using their feminine charms to distract an opponent. It's not what I would think of when I hear flying squadrons, but okay. It is apparently a term from the era. Okay, building the court hand. So first, the player has to select their faction leader from among the characters who have that ability, who are the highest ranked. So if you have an A faction leader in your deck, that has to be chosen before any others. This character must be selected as part of your hand. The royalists have to add Catherine de' Medici to their court hand, no matter what, if she's still alive. Now, I don't know, she might be able to be a faction leader as well, in which case... Nope. She's just a high intrigue bonus character. And you get, this is not a bad thing. You get her in addition to everything else you get. Then, the royalist player and the player allied with the royalist select one character from their deck and put that into their hand. The opposing player, the one opposed to the alliance, whatever that is, chooses 2 characters out of their deck and puts it into their hand. Then, each player hands their deck of remaining cards to the person to their right, who then picks 4 cards totally at random, chooses 2 of them to give back into the hand, and the other 2 go back in the deck. Then the cards are passed, I guess kind of 2 spaces to the left or again to the right or whatever, so that the other person who isn't, so that you're holding the other deck that isn't yours. You choose, again, 2 cards, you draw 4 cards, and you choose 2 to give back, and 2 go back in the deck, but that doesn't really matter much. So, the royalists will have 7 cards, 6 if Catherine is dead. Their ally will have 6, and the opposing player will have 7. If any faction doesn't have enough character cards remaining in their deck, then they have phantom cards to complete their hand that count as 0 valued characters with no special abilities. Okay. Now, the 2 current cooperating allied players each get 5 actions during a court phase, but the opposing player gets to take 6. When all players have used all their actions, the court phase ends. There's not a really easy way to keep this count. I don't know quite how to deal with it. At the beginning of the game, the court phase order is the Royalists first, then the League, then the Huguenots. After a call to arms, it goes to Royalists, Huguenots, then League. Starting with the first faction turn order, you select one of your character cards in your hand, announce which one of the actions you want to perform, and roll 2 dice to see if it's successful. You need to roll a 7 or more. If you roll an unmodified 2, you not only failed, but you also die. The character that you allocated. But Henry de Bourbon, the Huguenot Assembly, and François d'Alençon are immune to this effect. think this is Navarre. Anyway. Regardless of success or failure, the next player then selects a character and performs an action. They alternate until all have done their chosen number of actions, up to the maximum permissible. You must play a card during your turn. You cannot pass. So let's talk about the different actions. Surprise attack. I've already alluded to this one. A character can attempt to take control of a city and a province that's listed on that character's card. You cannot take Paris or La Rochelle this way. The die roll is modified by the military value on the character card and takes a -1 penalty when you're going for a major city. If you're successful, you take control of the city, replacing the opponent's cube with one of your own, and you can adjust the numbers. Gaining influence in court. Only if you're the cooperating faction can you attempt this. The cooperating faction is the one allied with the royalists. I see the royalists have gained influence, so maybe they are a cooperating faction. That's what I think it's the case, because I think they do that in here. If it succeeds, you choose one of your current allies' cities and replace their cube with one of your own faction's color. The die roll is modified by the intrigue value, a -1 if it's a major city. Now for surprise attack, it looks like you can do this against your own ally as well. Diplomacy. A diplomatic mission to a neighboring country provides you troops and money if successful. Each faction has its own diplomatic tables printed on its player aid. Each faction can only attempt diplomacy once per country per turn. The die roll is modified by intrigue. If the player aid indicates that troops are raised, an army marker must be placed on the board in the territory of that country, because Spain has multiple territories in the game. Armies raised in the German states are put in the Saint Empire, the Holy Rolling Empire. Any associated troop points are recorded in the owning player's display. The money points are just put on the track. Money is easy to move around. Only a character with the writer ability may attempt a die roll to complete the action of writing a treaty. This is modified by their intrigue value. If they're a writer, they get a +1 to it as well. So the number of treaty points obtained by each player is recorded on the track. Each faction can only succeed in this action once per turn. Again, you're going to have to mark this somehow. In the rare case where a faction has no writers in its deck, it can perform one attempt with any character, but the die roll must be made without any modifier. They don't get their intrigue. Any character, you can try to recruit a character. Any character from another faction who is marked with 2 allegiance bars may be convinced to switch sides. Each faction has a list of characters it can recruit on its player aid. Maybe I've got it backwards, which way it's supposed to be. It's only possible to recruit a character that has already entered the game and has not yet been removed. Each faction can only attempt this action once per turn for each character. The name of the targeted character has to be announced before rolling the dice. The die roll is modified by the intrigue value. If the action is successful, the character card switches to the card deck belonging to the faction that successfully performed the recruit action at the end of the current court phase. A recruited military leader counter becomes immediately available to the recruiting faction for the upcoming war phase. Any character who has already switched sides cannot switch again for the remainder of the turn. Exception. Henri de Montmorency d'Amville may not be recruited during the first turn, and Henri de Nevers cannot be recruited until François d'Alençon is removed. That can't be. Okay. No, it's Henry. Okay. Yeah. I didn't know he went double. It makes sense. Tax collection. Only the royalists can attempt this. If it's successful, the kingdom's royal tax marker is moved 1 box forward. The roll is modified by intrigue, and administrators add 1 to the die roll. At the end of the court phase, all characters still alive remain available for the upcoming war phase if they have a corresponding leader counter. Some characters may have switched sides, and their leader counter is new, and I gotta do something with my battery because it seems to be pretending that it's working. You know what? I think it's a good time for me to pause before I go into the war phase, because I need tea. And we're about halfway through the rule book. Some advertising. During the war phase, you're going to be trying to capture enemy cities while protecting your own. This continues until all factions decline to take further rounds, at which point the war for the current turn ends and the winner of the war is determined. You got a sequence of play for the war phase section. First you draw war cards, then you deploy any armies that you have available. Then you assign leaders to the armies. Then you go to the war rounds, and the leaders get reassigned during the war rounds. So this is not a fixed situation. And then you determine at the end of those rounds who won the war. At the beginning of each war phase, each player draws 1 war card from that deck. And you can play these at the beginning of a move, a battle, or a siege, either friendly or enemy. The active faction must play their cards before the reactive one. That's not well defined because in a war, okay, you might not be either of those actually, but okay. There's no limit to the hand size, and the war cards can be kept from one turn to another. Several can be played on the same turn. You have your generic army counters. As they're deployed in the game, they're placed on the map. The troop points are recorded here. Each army has a strength between 1 and 9. You cannot have troop points without an army counter. Some armies may have already appeared during the court phase due to diplomacy. Each player age should be arranged on the play area so you can see what's in everybody's armies. There's no hidden information there. I'm assuming the cards that you're holding in your hand are hidden. Unless something says special, that is just the generic, right? Recruitment of troops into the armies is different for each faction. First, the royalist can spend his royal tax levels. The first level that he spends gives him 8 troop strengths and 5 money points. Each additional level, though, that he spends only gives 2 troop strengths and 2 money. The largest royalist army must be located in Paris. If Paris is controlled by an opposing faction, the royalists must place their largest army in another city under their control. Other armies can be placed in any provinces with a controlled royalist city. Now, it's possible you might get troops here and then not spend any taxes. So don't take this as absolute. It's only absolute in terms of the deployment phase. Okay. And yeah, you can only place your armies in a province with controlled royalist cities. The Huguenot then gets 1 troop point and 1 money point for every 3 or portion of 3 Huguenot cities that they have. These armies can be placed anywhere in provinces containing at least 1 Huguenot-controlled city. Note that 2 people could be placing armies in the same province. Lastly, the League player gets 5 money points while they're allied with the Royalists. They only get troop and supplemental points through diplomacy for the League faction. But after the call to arms, they get 1 money point and 1 troop point for every city under their control. Armies may be placed anywhere in the provinces containing at least 1 League-controlled city. You cannot place an army counter where there's already one of your side, except outside of France. Troop points may be added by an allied faction. Which is to say, 2 factions that are on the same side, the Royalist and their ally, are able to strengthen each other's forces with their own troops. Then each leader counter, each army has to be assigned a leader counter. Each leader counter shows the allegiance colors corresponding to its character card, a portrait or rank, tactical value, and in some cases a support ability. The support ability will be an asterisk on the counter. And I hope that's not one. Oh, I'm having a hard time seeing one of them asterisks. Is this one? No, that looks... Is this one? Yeah, I think here's one. It's pretty faint, but it's up in that left-hand corner. Okay. The leaders are divided into 4 grades of seniority. This is different from the faction leadership, A, B, C, and D. The tactical ratings go from 0 to 3. Support is the star up in the corner that I showed. And now there's a note here that applies to the next paragraph. Assign a leader to each army deployed. First, the royalist side places all of its leaders, followed by the opposing side. This is important. You place your leaders by side, not by faction. There are several restrictions when assigning a leader to an army. The highest ranked leader of that side has to be assigned to the largest army in troop points, in descending order. In case of a tie, the royalist player chooses which army gets the highest ranking leader for each faction. Each side must change the assignment of leaders at the start of its respective rounds to ensure that all of the above criteria are met, i.e., if a force becomes weaker, and this is like EU, you have to shift your leaders around. They can teleport, though, here, which makes it easier. If a leader has a star on its counter, it can be placed together with another leader to provide a bonus in combat. The supporting leader must be strictly of inferior rank, A through D, and of better tactical value. Only one leader per army can provide its support ability. This can allow a player to allocate 2 leaders per army. Now, what's weird about this? Well, I think that supporting leader is able to join with the other leader and doesn't have to command an army. As long as he's of inferior rank to the original leader, he's able to do this. If an army becomes, and he has to have better tactical value, which is important. If an army becomes leaderless, you assign a leader from the leader pool to it. If your leader pool is empty, the army is considered to be commanded by a grade D, 0 tactical value leader. An army is controlled by the faction of its commanding leader. Now, this is important because it determines when you get to move things, and it determines who gets the victory points for winning battles with that army. This is kind of weird because the royalists might be supplying the troops to a League or Huguenot commander and allowing them to get victory points that way. A province can only contain 1 army from the same side, which means 2 allied factions can't both be in the same province. If 2 armies of the same side are in the same province, they must merge. The highest ranking leader takes command of that merged army. If there were more than 9 troop points present, the rest just die. The other leader goes into the leader pool. I would assume that he could become a supporting leader if he otherwise qualifies, but that's not spelled out. Once armies are in place and leaders have been assigned, each side alternates rounds until all factions of both sides decide to pass. Before the call to arms, the Huguenot plays first. After the call to arms, the League plays first. The side that is currently moving is the active side. You move by sides. The current number of troop points in an army determines its movement points, activation cost, and possible attrition. Movement points are the number of provinces that army can travel through in a single round. And then this is spelled out here. A small army is 1 to 3 strength points. That has 3 movement points. Medium, 4 to 6, has 2. Large, 7 to 9, has only 1 movement point. A round is a succession of province activations. To begin each round, one of the active side's players must first announce the province it wishes to activate. That side then moves any armies they wish into that province, provided they have enough movement points to reach it from their current position. It's possible to split an existing army into two parts, as long as you follow conditions of command. A leader is assigned to the remaining army that stays behind. Now, the conditions of command become confusing here, right? Do they mean that you reshuffle your entire leadership when you split an army? I don't know. Or what do they mean? I just don't know. Or must you stay within the strictures of the command roles and you can't split if you're going to violate them? Armies must be moved in decreasing order of their leader's rank among the activated armies. Cooperating factions rules. The armies are moved in order based on the rank of their leader from A to D by the leader's owner, not by the army's owner. A leader may decline to move, but may not move after for this round. If several armies from one side are moved simultaneously, they must respect the rules above. You may move an A and a C leader together, but if you move a B leader first, you can't go back to the A leader. This is messy and confusing. I think what it's saying is I can pick the A leader and the C leader, move them together, and then I can go back and move the B leader. That the C leader doesn't fuck me. But again, there are examples in there that I think show that. And there may be an example here that shows it. No, I think this one fails too. There's a lot of fuzziness in these rules. At the end of the movements for the round, the active side must pay money points based on the troop points inside the activated province. The cost may be shared between the allied factions if they agree to. Now, that's listed here. So you activate to move into a province, you count the total number of troops that made it to that province, and that's the amount of money that you're charged. But things get fuzzy again, so don't worry. The cost may be shared among the allied factions if they agree to. The movement is not possible if a side is unable or unwilling to pay the cost. Movement attrition is resolved immediately after the above. The total troop points of the active side is summed, and then they face attrition, which is a 7 or more for a medium-sized army, and it's automatic for a large army. Small army doesn't face attrition. Then all necessary actions in that province are immediately resolved. Okay, well, so things are kind of screwy here. At the end of the movement round, you have to pay the money. But then we get down here, and once activation of the province is complete, the active player may designate a new province to be activated, and so on. I think what they mean to say is not at the end of all movements for the round, but at the end of one set of movement into one province, you have to pay the money and do this stuff. Because otherwise, you're just not going to be able to keep track of it, and they're just asking for problems. It also doesn't add anything to the game. It just adds problems. It's not possible to activate an army that's already been activated in a province this round, or to reactivate a province that has already been activated this round. Okay, we gotta swap batteries, and this is the part of the game that is really, all the military stuff is really kind of not well hammered out. Once the active side declines to activate, the opposite side takes over and becomes active. Both sides will alternate back and forth until one side declines to activate. No, I could not activate my A leader, move my B leader. I can't go back and do my A leader, move my C leaders, whatever. So it's not that I'm always forced to move my highest ranked leader. I just want to make that certain, because that feels a little bit not nailed down, but it's possible that one side may play successive activations while the other, without armies or money, cannot activate. And you just keep passing. But you could choose to pass, I think, rather than do anything. I'm not sure. Each side must change the assignments of leaders at the start of its respective rounds. I think at the start of each of its respective rounds is what they mean, to ensure that all of the above criteria are met. Troops raised in England must spend 1 movement point to cross the English Channel unless the Huguenot player controls a city in Normandy, in which case they can be placed directly in a Huguenot army in Normandy, or create a new army there if one doesn't exist. To cross the Loire, which again is not defined except by these underlined spaces that are along it. It's necessary to control a city built on the river or one of its tributaries. These cities are underlined on the game map. Now, there doesn't seem to be a penalty for crossing the tributaries. And down here, I think it's crossable, but I don't know. It's also not on a border. Which is really kind of disturbing. If one army enters a province where its side does not control such a city, the army must stop its move. Okay, and they give an example. And the example is very disturbing because this doesn't appear to be anything like the rule seems to say you just have to control one. I think the playbook example says you just have to, shows that you just have to say one. But the example seems to say something different. An army from Lyonnaise enters into Auvergne. Lyonnaise, where's Auvergne? Okay, it's right next door. Okay. Enters into Auvergne, which I guess has the Loire. It cannot continue its movement if it does not control Iossar, which does indeed have an underline on it. Other cities along the river do not. So that's cool. So the army has to stop in Auvergne for this round. Now, I think there was an example. So this says, unless I can, this example seems to say, unless I control a city in the province that I entered, I'm stopped. I think there was a playbook example that defeats that, or that more closely matches the rules. I'm looking for it. I'm not finding it. Leadership. I seem to remember the Loire was mentioned, was handled here in a way that seems to go completely against that example. God, my wrist is killing me. Okay, here we go. The initiative goes back to the Catholic side, which decides to pursue the Reformed. Unfortunately, the crossing points on the Loire are all in the hands of the Huguenots. The capture of Nantes by a surprise attack during the court phase deprived the Catholic side of the only means of crossing the river. Okay. Maybe the only way to reconcile the example is to say the example's correct. What they're saying here is, well, they could find some other way across the Loire, because this is very disturbing. Now, this is not how this is written. It just says it's necessary to control one of these. It doesn't say... Oh, no, it does. If one army enters a province where its side does not control such a city, the army must stop its move. Good enough. Good enough. Okay. All right, now to other weirdness. Interception and evasion. This is the rule that they absolutely did not cover as far as I could tell. When an army moves into a province containing an opposing army from the other side, the opposing army may attempt to either intercept or evade. Sounds reasonable. Interception must be attempted first, then evasion. Okay, I think what they mean there is something. I'm not sure what. It's like you wouldn't want to do both, right? Interception and evasion are always inactive side actions. That's important. To resolve an interception, roll 2 dice modified by the tactical value of the respective army leaders and the size of the armies. Add the tactical value of the intercepting leader and subtract the tactical value of the intercepted army leader. The intercepting leader gets a bonus if they're small and a penalty if they're big, and likewise in the other direction. Okay. Doesn't tell me what happens in an interception. What I think this is all meant to say is the attacker can move into, the active player can move into a region and conduct an attack. That's what the examples seem to imply. If the person present in a province that you're moving into, through, whatever, wishes to, they can try to intercept you on your way through there. Evasion, I would guess, is an attempt to avoid the attack that the enemy has, engineered by moving into the province. To resolve an evasion, you roll 2 dice modified by tactical of the respective army leaders, and the sizes of the armies same as before. And whoever gets the higher total again succeeds. No, you need a 7, right? It actually doesn't say. But 7's always succeed at things, is always the success number. So, an intercepted army must engage in battle. An army that successfully evades the battle may either stay in the province without having to fight, or move to an adjacent province in which it controls a city. If neither side wishes to intercept or evade, wait a minute, only one side can do this, right? It says this is always the inactive side actions. If neither side wishes to intercept or evade, skip this step and proceed directly to the battle resolution. No! I'm going to fake this the way I think it's meant to read, but yeah, obviously. And the way I think it's meant to read is that you can intercept stuff that's crossing your province. It doesn't have to be the target province. You can intercept in the target province, but that probably isn't that big an advantage. So here, the Huguenot player does not wish to intercept, and the Royalist, who's active, has announced his intention to fight. Okay. The Huguenot does not feel he's in a position of strength, so he tries to evade. He ends up succeeding. Okay. That's the easy case of it. What it doesn't cover is, can you intercept moving through? It's what it seems to be, but yeah, not sure. When 2 armies clash, a number of dice are rolled according to the size of their army and the value of the leaders in command. A small army rolls 1 die, medium 2, a large rolls 4 dice. You add 1 die for each point of tactical value. That can be up to 3. Add 1 die if the army includes a starred supporting leader with a higher tactical value than the commanding leader. Each die rolls succeeds on a 5 or a 6, and that'll be a hit that removes 1 enemy troop point. The army that inflicts the most hits wins the battle. In the event of a tie, the largest remaining army wins. If both are still tied, the Royalist player gets to choose who wins. If defeated, and they could choose their own side to lose. If defeated, the phasing side's army may no longer move and can choose to retreat, which is an indication that you were intercepted, I think. And can but I'm not sure. Maybe you can attack things as you're moving. And can choose to retreat into an adjacent province where it controls a city or remain in the province where the battle took place. If victorious, the phasing army may continue its movement and potentially launch a siege against a city in the target province. Okay. Which indicates interception should be able to happen as you're moving through. Every leader who has participated in a battle has to test their fate. They roll 2 dice, and on a result of 10 or more, the leader either dies or is captured. Roll another 2 dice for no apparent reason. Right? I believe we'll see this. On an even score, the leader is taken prisoner. On an odd result, the leader is killed. So the distribution of odd-even on a 2-die roll is exactly the same on a single die. Why are you doing this to me? A leader remaining alone without troops after the roll is removed from the board and will return to play the next turn. Captured leaders are set aside for the duration of the current war phase, but they'll return at the end of the war phase. No ransom money is exchanged or anything. The money is huge quantities. Victory points are awarded for all captured leaders as shown in the section Determine War Winner. It is assumed that captives are freed at the end of the turn. Henry de Nevers cannot be killed, but can be taken prisoner. If he gets killed, he's taken prisoner instead. That must be nice to be immortal. Sieges. After all movement and battles have been completed, sieges are resolved. A siege is the only way to take control of a city during the war phase. To besiege a city, an army must begin with at least as many troop points as the city garrison. Minor cities have 1 troop. Majors have 2. Paris and La Rochelle each have 4. Armies cannot take refuge in cities. When resolving a siege, you roll 1 die for every troop point of the city and score 1 hit against the besieging army for each 5 or 6. The besieging army throws the same number of dice as calculated in a normal battle, which could be significantly... It could be rather random, actually. I mean, the size... A size 3 army only gets 1 die, but the leader gets dice. To take control of the city, the besieging army must score a number of hits equal to the city's troop points. If unsuccessful, the attacker must try again in a subsequent round, at which point the defending forces will have been replenished. I don't think must is the case. I think you have to target again, but I'm not sure. If successful, the attacker must spend the number of troop points needed to replace the enemy garrison to its original troop points value. If the attacker does not have sufficient troop points, the siege fails. So I don't know if a siege is maintained between or not. There were no examples that showed that I was aware of. At the end of a siege, leaders can be either wounded or killed. Guessing, yeah. Throw 2 dice. If the result is 11 or 12, roll again another 2 dice. On even, they're wounded for the war phase. On odd, they're killed. Well, wounded is like being captured. Henry de Nevers cannot be killed. He ends up wounded. After a siege, the besieging army must spend 1, 2, or 4 troop strength to replenish the garrison. If he cannot, the siege just failed. Wounded leaders are set aside for the duration of the war phase, but they'll be available again. But they don't generate points. That's the difference with capture. Any city taken by the player who cooperates with the royalist becomes royalist controlled. At the beginning of the game, the league player may only assist the royalist to take cities in the war phase. We got an example here. Yeah, so it doesn't talk about whether you get free sieges if you stick around or anything like that. I think the game is too simple for that. But when both sides decline to take rounds simultaneously or consecutively, let's try all the different words. The current war phase ends and the war winner is determined. Okay. Winning battles against small, medium, large armies produces 1, 2, or 4 points. Each minor city is worth 1 that you take. Each major city is worth 2 that you take. You get 4 points for taking Paris or La Rochelle, 1 point for each C or D leader captured, 2 for each A or B leader captured. You will accumulate your war points, I guess, using a cube on here or something. They say a marker. There isn't anything. The faction with the most war points wins. At least I don't think there is. Maybe there's something. No. Okay. The faction with the most war points wins. If the Royalist is tied with the Huguenot or League players, the Royalist player elects the winner. The Royalist decides all ties between the Huguenot and League players. Just decide all ties. Standard rule, but the winning faction increases its treaty marker by 1 point. If the League wins, it gains control of a non-Huguenot city. I guess that's a Royalist city. Once St. Bartholomew's Day massacre has taken place, the Huguenot faction, if victorious, may take control of 2 cities currently under Royalist control if he wins. Yeah. So the League, by winning lots of battles, will convert things to Royalist cities, but then if they're the war winner, they convert a Royalist city over to League. That's pretty cool. The Huguenot takes 2 Royalist cities, except for Paris. Now, Paris is not accepted here, but Paris starts out as League. So its tendency is to be pro-Catholic. When the current war phase is complete, all remaining armies and leaders are removed from the board, all money markers are set to 0, and all prisoners or wounded leaders are returned to their factions. Set the war point markers to 0. Some event cards may be played during the end phase. We talked about the victory conditions already. If you get your automatics, it's at the end of a full game turn. You win. That might be more than one faction. And city control and political conviction is the total number of cities, 753. Total number of treaties, which include, remember, you get a treaty for winning the war phase. You also get other bonuses, but you get a treaty for winning the war phase. Well, most treaties gets 4, 2, and then 1. All right, we got some special rules here. St. Bartholomew. Oh, let me check my battery. It isn't charging right. Okay. When all players have built their court hand for the current round in turns 2 through 4, you roll against this. If you get less than or equal to that number, the massacre is triggered. Otherwise, play continues. So it's pretty likely to happen. All characters in the Huguenot court hand are removed from the game, except Henry de Bourbon, the Viscount army, and Henry de Bourbon Condé. Their respective cards going back to the Huguenot characters deck. The Huguenot player then adds the Huguenot assembly card to his deck. Okay. The Huguenot player then draws 7 cards randomly from his character deck. The St. It basically just completely disrupts him. The St. Bartholomew's Day massacre can only happen once. If it has not been triggered by the 5th turn, it's no longer tested for. The Royalist player may automatically trigger the massacre with the Entrevue de Béon event card. It may only be played during the court phase, as specified on the card, and must be done before rolling the 2 dice. Once St. Bartholomew's Day massacre has been triggered, the Royalist Tour de France event card may no longer be played. And I hope it says something on there. Call to arms. This occurs once per game. It triggers the last turn of the game. This last turn is played to the end of which a victorious faction will be determined. Call to arms is triggered either by the disappearance of François d'Alençon through the Antwerp Fury event chit, his natural disappearance in turn 6, or the Royalist Il n'osera. He would not dare. Yeah, event card, which is the murder of the Duke of Guise. In either case, when the call to arms is triggered, the Huguenot faction will immediately join the Royalist side, and the League faction becomes the opposing faction. The League player then adds all call to arms character cards to his League character deck. If call to arms takes place before turn 6, the League player must immediately set aside Spanish intervention, Savoyard invasion, and death of Mary Stuart, and then draw one into their hand at random, discarding the other two for the duration of the game. I think what they mean is shuffle those 3 cards, you get one. The game ends at the end of the turn in which call to arms is triggered. Immediately check whether automatic victory conditions are met, otherwise count victory points. All right, there are a few special cards, and then there are the chits. Treaty of Hampton Courts allows the player to increase troops and money to the maximum without having to send a diplomatic mission. The Le Havre counter is located in the province of Normandy and counts as a small Huguenot city. If Le Havre changes ownership, the counter will be removed from the game. War weariness. After placement of armies and leaders during the current war phase, the Royalist designates 3 provinces that contain at least 1 Huguenot city. As long as no enemy army enters, Huguenot armies may not move outside the province, nor initiate siege inside the province. They are frozen. And we'd have to find some kind of marker to deal with that. Assassination, Vengeance, Disgrace. Playing one of these cards allows a player to take from the deck of leader cards of their choice, theirs or their opponent's, any one leader and remove it from the game. The leader general counter, if it had one, is also removed. Assassination or Vengeance cannot be applied to either a woman or priest, but Disgrace can be applied to anyone. La Rochelle. When playing this card, put the marker on the map as a reminder of the increase in income for the Huguenot faction. La Rochelle. Activate. I don't know what activate is. Guess the active army, but the province that you're activating. Yeah. Few event chits. Anvers Fury. Remove Francois de Alençon. Colonial Tension. These are all pretty minor. Portuguese Succession. Yeah, not much. The Spanish Armada fucks Spain for the rest of the game. The Beggars. The Sea Beggars. +2 to the dice for United Provinces subsidies. Spanish bankruptcy. No Spanish subsidies. So, I mean, they've glued together some weird things. I have to say, I feel like something feels funky in terms of the decision of, yeah, let's give each player their own little tiny event deck and then throw these event chits in, and there's not many of them. Almost to the extent that there's an attempt to kind of script the game a little bit more than I expected with this, but we shall see how it plays out and how enjoyable, the mechanisms work out to be. Anyhow, I'll send this up. I'm not going to, by the way, happy Independence Day and all. It's past midnight now. I have an interview tomorrow, so in the morning, so I'm not going to be playing any of this tonight. But I'll probably get a little bit in tomorrow, unless I go wandering to go see fireworks or something.